Hello and thank you for joining me today. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a very simple drawing of this front of this boat, and this is a picture I found on pixabay.com. You'll have heard me mention Pixabay before. I use it quite a lot because of the license-free images. But the thing that struck me was this was a very simple image that I thought we could all have a go at, because we can ignore the background, we can change that, we can just put some sea behind or something like that. But I thought it was an image you could do really in any media. You could do it in ink, you could do it in watercolour, you can do it in something nice and bold like acrylic. If you've got one of those cheap acrylic canvases and you wanted to make something really quickly for a child's bedroom or something like that, this would be quite a nice image to do, because what you can do is change the colours to suit yourself, which colours would go with what you want to match maybe in your own home. So a very simple shape, but one thing we need to remember really is to go narrower here as we go back to give us the the depth of the boat. We don't want it to look too flat. Okay, so I'm going to do this using watercolour, but I'm going to do the drawing first of all with some watercolour pencil, and I'll perhaps come back later on as well and put more watercolour pencil over the top. So I'm using the Faber-Castell ones, so just ordinary watercolour pencils, and it's a set of 12. So like I say, I want to change the colours maybe, because if we're going to put a blue sea behind, perhaps we don't want a blue boat as well. So to make it quite striking and to stand out, I was thinking maybe go for an orange or a yellow. So yeah, I think I'll make the boat itself, the parts that are blue, I think I'm going to make that orange and use this nice bright orange. So I'll use that to make the outline. You'll see I've already done a margin here, just to make it a little bit smaller, but this image you could do absolutely any size you wanted. And we're going to come quite high up with it, and I'll just get those two shapes in to begin with, where the little rope is held in place. Now, one reason for using the coloured pencils instead of using the pencils, an ordinary pencil, is it's actually easier if you're using these coloured paints to sort of blend the drawing away into the paint. So we'll go right to the edge of the picture with that. We're perhaps a little bit further this way than in the original picture, but that doesn't matter, we've got a bit of extra boating. So there's a slight curve on that, not much of one, but there is a slight curve. And then we've got these little areas where we've got the screw head in there, so I'll just pop those in. And like I say, we can come back after we've done the painting and put some extra paint on as well, if we've some extra detail on with the pencils as well. So I've given them all a bit of a sharpen, these pencils. Now on there, that it's obviously been painted to begin with, and then it's turned turned to silver. This part's obviously metal and this part's back to the wood. So now we need to look at how far down we're coming with this, and it's not halfway down, but well, it's nearly actually, isn't it? If you go across from there, it's nearly half and half from the top of those, so probably down to about here somewhere. And that's slightly narrower, not too much actually, but slightly narrower at that end than where we set off. So we want to go a little bit narrower as we go along. And then the next part, we'll just leave out that middle part because that's a different colour. We'll have to think about which colour we're going to use. So then we start again about here and just go more or less in a straight line. So this goes up towards the middle where could emphasise that curve a little bit more as well, and then down and around. And that means this part here is a lot narrower than it is up here. Okay, so I'll get another colour now to pop the rope in. I'll just use this sort of light brown colour just to put the edge of the rope in. So we've got 2 ropes there, and we want this to be really nice and straight, this line coming down. You'll notice how when I'm drawing, I draw in little lines rather than trying to do one big line. That way you tend to be a bit more accurate. It's much easier to do little short lines. And then we'll just put the shape of the rope in so that we're already starting to build some form up. So it's a very, very simple picture. Not much to it at all really, because we're not going to put that background in, like I said. We just want to, you know, have a nice little colourful picture. So the emphasis really here is on the colour. Got something going over here which is another hook or something, and then one you can hardly see, the sun's sort of shining on that, and then we've got a rope that comes down the side of the boat, much narrower than here because obviously it's further away from us, and one that goes down. It's obviously fastened down or just dangling down there. And then we'll put the line of the rest of the boat. So we've got orange. I'm trying to think what other colour we should use. Maybe orange and... I don't really want to use blue. Maybe orange and green. Green would be a nice colour for a boat. We'll use a really bright green. A nice bright colour. Okay, so as well, we don't want to just colour this in flatly. We want to get some shape of the boat. So if you look at it, it's much darker here than it is here. We've obviously got a bit of light on it here, but also that's because of the shape of the boat where the light's hitting. We've got a little bit of a light hitting here because it's bowing out a little bit as well. So although it's very much blocks of colour, the 3 colours, 2 colours, we do still want to get a bit of depth and a bit of shape into that boat. So we'll have to watch that when we come to putting the paint on. So I think what I'm going to do first of all is put some of that depth in with the pencil. So where it's darker, I'm just going to colour a little bit in and leave where it's a little bit lighter. Just gently, just to give myself an idea of where some of these darks and shadows are. Because this will blend in with the paint when I start putting the paint on as well. Much lighter down this side, then it's dark underneath, so that wants to be dark underneath with the green. So don't forget you're changing your colours. Don't go back to you know, the colours of the photograph when you start getting your paints out. And just change the angle of my arm a little bit here and go nearly all the way to the rope. It's much darker than it is on the other side. And if you look down here, it's darker where the shape of the boat's coming around the edge there. And we can come back on top of this later with more pressure. Vary the pressure on your pencil to go darker. But for now we're just sort of positioning things really and getting a feel for the whole picture. Okay, so I'll get the green, and there's a shadow you'll be able to see under here. This rim is casting a shadow all the way along here, right down to this end, and it goes quite dark under there, so put a bit more pressure on the pencil. Like I said, we'll be doing this with paint in any case in a moment. And just start and build up some of these tones with your coloured pencils. Again, this side's much more in the shadow. So this isn't actually a watercolour pad, it's the mixed media pad that I've used quite a bit recently. And I do like this paper, it's a really handy paper to have, nice big pad. very difficult to see. It's quite a subtle change of light, but there is actually a bit of a shadow behind the rope as well. We can build these shadows up as we go along. Okay. I'm actually looking at it now and you can see there's a person just there. We really wouldn't want to put those in. That looks going to look a bit silly. So what we're going to do behind is just see. So we're going to leave that because we'll just put that in with the paint. Having said that, I'm just wondering if it would be nice to have a horizon with the pencils, because we've got some really nice blues. This is a particularly nice one. Let's have a look at the colour. I mean, it calls it ultramarine, light ultramarine, but I suppose it's a light one, but it is very pale for an ultramarine. I'm just thinking we might actually put a little bit of that in and make a bit of a horizon here. And try and keep that line straight, obviously, if it's your horizon line. Keep those lines horizontal so that it gives us the feel of a flat, calm sea. So I would use that because it's a lovely colour, and then when we come back later we could perhaps put, you know, a bit of an impression of some waves in there. Okay, so I'll go now and get some water and we'll start and do a little bit of painting. Now I've mixed up two colours, the orange to begin with and the green. I haven't just done the blue yet, but plenty of water and a nice bright orange. So this is the cadmium orange and it's in the Winsor & Newton. And just go over the top of that pencil, don't worry about where it's going to dissolve into the paint. Like I say, we'll come back later and put more detail on. Here I'll just leave the tips of those. Oops, I've got a bit too much on that brush. I'll just dry that brush off. I'll leave the tips of those little spikes because, like I said, the paint's rubbed off there and they're sort of silver where they've gone back to the metal. Don't know why we've ended up with too much water on there. So you need a nice fine brush for this. You can just see a little bit of the boat between the rope there, so I'll just put a tiny bit of orange in there. So if you're doing this in acrylic, whatever medium you're doing it in, just the same applies. Just keep these simple shapes, but make sure you get a bit of a difference in the colour with the shadows to get the shape of the boat. So really, once you've got the drawing down, it's pretty straightforward filling in. Just move my arm round the other side of the page. You can move your page round a bit more than I do because obviously I'm trying to keep it in one place for the camera. A little bit wonky, but I don't think it matters. It's perhaps an old boat. So you will recall we did a boat last week, last Monday I think it was, as well. We did the front of the boat as if we were on it, so the opposite angle to this painting, and we did that in watercolour with ink drawing. So if you didn't see that video, I'll pop the link to that one up here. Again, here I've not done the ropes quite as they are because I've not left that gap in between. There's a little bit of a gap there, so I'll just pop that in with the paint so we can correct our drawing as we go along a little bit. That's a bit much on my brush there actually. Let's go back and do that bit. Can you see, I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but this where I'm picking up the pencil, the watercolour pencil, there's a lot of yellow in it. It's sort of separating out the yellow and it's rather pretty, making some nice colours. So just blocking in this watercolour on this nice smooth mixed media paper. Of course you could use a watercolour paper and you'd probably get better results. You might not get as much cockling and bleeding as I'm getting there. So I'll leave the green for a moment because we want that to dry so the two colours aren't mixing into each other, because we want them to be very distinct. So I'll go on to perhaps the sky, mixing up some colour for this sky. So we want it to look a bit Mediterranean, we want it to be nice and sunny, so let's go for a cerulean rather than anything too dark. So I'll just mix some of the cerulean blue up, and again it's the Winsor & Newton. Plenty of water, so we've got plenty of the white paper shining through to make a nice light sky. And we want it to be very straightforward and simple, this sky. So I'll get a bigger brush and we'll just fill in the whole thing. Again, you might get a better result with your washes if you're using a proper watercolour paper, but I do actually quite like this mixed media paper if you're just using light washes of watercolour and you're not doing anything too complex with too much water. You can get just a nice effect. So again, you need a brush with a decent point so that you can go around your boat there and work quickly so that your paint isn't drying and making too many lines. And you can see that cerulean is one of those colours that granulates, particularly when you mix it with other colours. You'll see the granulation in the sky there, but actually I think it's quite nice for sky and water the way it granulates, because it just gives you that impression of a bit of texture and variety in the colours. A bit of a hazy day, hazy sunny day. So we'll carry on with the same colour down into the sea. This is starting to dry quite nicely now. Go around those little pieces there at the edge of the boat. I mean, you could leave those out, they're a bit fiddly. Just another little bit of interest though, really. So we want the same blue in the sea as we've got in the sky, because of course the sky reflects in the water. If you're doing this on a much bigger canvas and you want it to be a bit more interesting, you could always put a little boat in the background, you know, a little sailing boat, something further in the background. You could get a picture off, again, off Pixabay as a reference to make that up. Or you could put a bird in the sky, you could put some clouds in the sky, whatever you wanted to make it a bit more interesting. You could put an island here. Like we said last week, alter the composition to make it more interesting for yourself. If you're doing it for a child's bedroom, if you've got a child that's into boats and things, you could always put their name on the boat, something like that, or you could do it for a birthday card and pop their name on the boat. That'd be quite nice to do. So we'll get the green now because that red started to dry. So we're doing this all wet on dry, we're not doing any real blending wet in wet. Maybe I'll just swap my brush. I forgot I've got the large brush there. Much easier to do this with a slightly smaller brush. And paint in the direction of the boat, the way that the shape of the boat's going. Move your brush in that direction. And again, when you do your drawing, you want to leave a little bit of a gap between those two ropes that I've managed to get wrong there. So you'll see I'll just put a little bit of green in between, just so we can get that impression that the ropes are slightly separated and it's two ropes, not just one big one. So you might recall last week's video on the boat was sponsored by Voyage bracelets, who've kindly given me this bracelet to sponsor these 2 videos. So this is the second and last of the 2 sponsored videos for this bracelet. So if you did want to have a look at the website, because they come in all sorts of different colours, or with this nice anchor piece on them in gold plated. They're all in different colours and they're all on the website, and they're all unisex, which is nice, and they'll deliver worldwide also, so wherever you're watching from you can still get them. So I'll pop the link down below in the description to the website like I did last week as well. Okay, can you see it's starting to dry? And again, because it's the mixed media paper, it's not just drying as evenly as it would on a watercolour paper, but not to worry, it's still going to make a pretty picture. Okay, so we'll leave it to dry now because we want to start and think about getting these depth of colour in and the shadows in. One way you can make a nice shadow colour is to use the thing that's opposite it on the colour wheel. So with orange, which is our first colour, the opposite on the colour wheel is blue. So we'll put some of that cerulean that we used in the sky into that mix of orange, and also a little bit more of the cadmium to make it slightly thicker. And then that makes a nice shadow colour that we can then go on top of. So leave that highlight at the top of the boat where it's just catching the light there, and carefully go around this little piece here where it's casting a shadow on itself. See a little bit of shadow there where we've got those screws and some of the shape up here and along here. So as well as the shadow, use it to get a little bit of form in as well. So we need to see where the edge of that piece of metal comes to. Then all down this side it's much lighter, apart from perhaps a bit at the end there. A little bit of shadow across the top of here and around here. And you can keep that same colour, and when this is dry, put some more on if you want it to be darker. In fact, you can put a little bit more in there now. And don't forget, this is going to dry a lot lighter. So this whole side here is a lot lighter, except for that little bit of rim there. We maybe should have left some of that white, but we can come back later with a white crayon and make that white on top. And although we're putting that shadow colour on, we've still got those nice yellows coming through from the pencils that we used earlier, and we will put some more pencil on top in a moment once this is dry as well. So here we need the shadow coming around the corner of the boat to give it that shape, and a little bit here. But most of this, there's a little line there, it's very subtle, you can't see. A lot of these colours are very subtle shifts in the light and dark. Okay, so opposite on the colour wheel to green is of course red. So what we'll do is we'll actually use that orange. We won't use a red, we'll use the orange, the cadmium orange that we've been using, because it's quite a red orange, and we'll just pop that into that green, just a tiny bit. And that's going to make our shadow colour for our green. You can see there we've got a bit of a run, but never mind, we'll let them blend in together. So nearly all of this side really is much more in shade than the other side. Everything this side of the rope, in fact. again going in the direction of the boat to get that shape. So a little bit of shadow up here where from the ropes, and here from that rim on the top there, and a tiny bit down here. And if you want that line to be softer, just dry your brush off completely and soften that to let it blend in. I don't actually mind a line when you're doing shadows, it just because, you know, a lot of shadows do have a very definite line. If you look at this one shadow down here, it's got a very definite line because it's the shape of the rim above. So you don't actually necessarily need to soften off that edge. And down here it's a bit of a shaped shadow and a highlight there, so I think we're going to come back perhaps and put 1 or 2 bits of highlights in afterwards with some white pencil. And there's a shadow all the way along really where the shape of the boat is there. That's just run into there mainly because this paper's cockling. Can you see it's run into there? So just very lightly move that back, dry that off a bit. And I'll just soften this a bit whilst I've got that damp brush. Okay, so it's starting to come together, this shape. I'll just get some more of that blue. We're not going to do anything else in the sky, but we will just put a few extra lines in the sea. Leave some gaps. Just give yourself a bit more structure to the sea. I've gone over the rope there, so again just be careful of that and take that out. Okay, so now we need to leave that to completely dry. Okay, so I've now put away my paints and just come back to my pencils, and I'll start again with that orange. So we can now sharpen up some of these lines because this is completely dry. When you're checking to see if your paint's dry, use the back of your hand. The front of your hands has got oil in your fingers, so if you do that you can end up with you know, marks on your paper. So always use the back of your hand, and if it feels cool and dry, you know that you're okay to go. Carry on. So I'm going to sharpen up this edge here. And under here. So it's not going to end up looking exactly like the original picture, even without the colour change. The drawing isn't perfect, but we're getting a nice shape of that boat and some nice bright colour. So where it's most in shadow, you go over it, put your detail in, get that line of that screw back in. Got a bit of rust on here, but we're not going to worry about the rust. Some of these lines need putting back in because when we've come in with the sky, obviously the water from the paintbrush has hit that, and it's ended up making it a little more dissolved than it was, so we need to put that back in. The nice thing about this is you've got that definition of the drawing with your pencil, but also still got that watercolour feel of your paint underneath. So get your pencils nice and sharp. Use either a sharpener or a knife, but make sure you set off at the beginning of the day when you're starting your drawings with them all nice and sharp, then you're not having to keep stopping to redo them. And at this stage really, how far you carry on, how much detail and definition you put in is up to you. Like I said, it could be an old boat that's perhaps in better days, it might be a bit rusty, or you might want it to look like a new pristine boat. Again, vary the pressure on your pencil as well. So that's really brought that away from the sky, but I do feel that that rope and around here isn't just standing out from the sky too much. So we'll just get that back in. I know it's not necessarily that colour, I know the rope's white, but we'll just put a bit of shadow on the rope. It's a tatty rope that's been used a bit, so 1 or 2 bits of line and shadow, just quite randomly really. Leave it mostly white, but just put a bit of texture in with the side of your pencil and emphasise 1 or 2 of those lines. Again, like I say on all these videos, you're going to have a lot more time than me to get more detail in if you really want to, or you can keep it nice and simple because it's such a simple shape. So we'll move on to the green. Again, we've got that shadow underneath here. And the green pencil that we used is much brighter than the paint that we used. We didn't have a paint in this colour. We could have perhaps tried to make one, which is something you could do, is match your pencil colour better to your paint colour than I have done. But I don't actually mind. I think it's quite nice to have those 2 shades of green there. This one's just going to brighten the whole thing up. But can you see how the paint's still showing through? The colour and the shadow is still showing through. We're not covering it up, we're not blanking the whole lot in. We're just lightly giving it a shade. And go right up to the rope if you can. If you wanted to go much darker, we could use the other green. So we've got a much darker green here. So can you see, if you look at the photograph in here, it's very dark where the 2 colours meet, because it's, so the panels, it's not just that it's been painted in a stripe, it's actually the panel itself that's painted. So you want the 2 separate panels to be apparent there. Again, you can put more of that green in between to separate those ropes. I think that's better with a slightly darker green under the rim there, just to get that shape, shadow there. Sorry about the squeaky chair, I keep adjusting myself to get my arm in the right position. And this is one of these things that you could spend quite a lot of time on, or less if, like me, you wanted to get it done quite quickly. It would make quite a nice little birthday card or something like that. If you could write an age on it, couldn't you, for a child or something like that, as well as the name. Let's use this one again. And see here, like I said, it's a cheap paper, well, not a cheap paper, but an inexpensive pad is a better way of saying, with this mixed media paper. So we've got 1 or 2 bits of runs and cauliflowers here where I've had the paint wet and it's gone into each other. But with your pencil, if you go over the top of the whole thing, it sort of brings it together a bit, even though we can still see them underneath, brings them together a bit. And like I say, it could be a bit bashed and battered and have things stuck to it. Okay, so we could go on and put more on, but we'll go back to the orange now and come down to the bottom here. Again, this side's much darker. Let's get much more colour on this side, but leave that little bit of a highlight just where the 2 panels meet. And actually that's something I'm going to do with the green, is come back and sharpen that edge up completely. That's much better. Sharpen those two edges up there. I'll do that up here a little bit as well. I want to leave that white on the top, but I do want to just sharpen the edge of the boat. Okay, so I'll just pop those to one side and I'll get the white. So just look where it's the lightest. We've got some highlight up here, say on the metal there. One or two areas where it's sort of a bit bashed and battered. There's a bit of light. So you could put your highlights in with a pastel, you could put them in with a white acrylic. There's all sorts of ways of getting your white back, or we could have left the white paper or used a masking fluid if we were using watercolour paper. I don't think I'd try using masking fluid on this mixed media paper. Okay, so quite a quick video today and quite a simple little image, but I just thought you would find that nice if you, I'll put the link down below to the photograph. Like I say, I thought you could adapt it, so forget about this background and put whatever background you want in. Like I say, you could put another boat behind, you could put some birds, you could put an island, whatever you wanted to put behind, you could change that all together. And you could put a name on the front of the boat or a number or whatever you wanted really, and put the colours that suit perhaps your bedroom if it was for a child. Okay, so I hope you found that useful. Like I say, I will put the link in the description below to the website for the bracelet again. And I would like to say thank you to them once again for such a lovely bracelet. It's a lovely gift to have, and it all helps keep this channel going and helps, you know, support the channel so that I can carry on making videos like this. So if you want to let me know what other videos you'd like me to do, if you would like me to do more with the coloured pencils, or if you'd like me to do more watercolours, and what subjects you prefer, if you want to pop that in the comments below. Also, if you've got any hints and tips on working in watercolour and watercolour pencils for other subscribers, it's always great to put those in the comments as well and have a little discussion amongst yourselves. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll be back again with you soon. Bye for now.